The best Total War mod of all time? A review of Europa Barbarorum, mod for Rome Total War. Europa Barbarorum is my favorite mod of all time, and it is definitely the mod that got me to delve deeper into history and Total War games and modding in general. In this review, I'll tell you why it's one of the greatest mods ever created for any Total War game, or perhaps for any game period. Since I have already done a rather in-depth review of Europa Barbarorum 2, I will try to focus on different aspects of this mod for this review, since there are many similar details. Vanilla Rome Total War is indeed a game that's inspired by history, but, as they say in Pirates of the Caribbean, it provided them more with guidelines than actual rules. The amount of historical inaccuracies in the vanilla campaign are too many to count. The issue here for me is not that there are inaccuracies. Of course there have to be. This is a game with a rather high level of abstraction. But the fact is that there are many inaccuracies that don't serve any purpose. Having the incorrect name of a king, or a settlement that didn't exist yet on the map, are not things that make the game better or are done for balance purposes. They are just immersion breakers. They only have a negative effect on the experience. Europa Barbarorum's goal is to remove as many of these immersion-breaking issues and increase the accuracy and detail of the game as much as possible. In Vanilla Rome Total War, the factions do feel somewhat unique and different, especially due to each faction's rather limited but very unique unit roster. This made every faction play quite differently from each other, and you really felt the difference between each faction through the limitations in their unit roster. Europa Barbarorum takes this system to the extreme, with an incredibly detailed area of recruitment system and very interesting units spread across the entire map. Now, as you expand your erstwhile empire across the Mediterranean, you will have to take into account AOR considerations in order to properly garrison and consolidate your new holdings far from home. You can't march into Greece as a Parthian king and recruit more Parthian horse archers and eastern infantry. First of all, you have to set up a governorship or an allied kingdom government in the region you just conquered, and then you will gain access to a small assortment of barracks buildings, reflecting both local and tribal recruitment. At the lower tiers, these buildings will give you access to basic infantry, such as spearmen and slingers, and the higher tiers will provide you with the ability to recruit heavier infantry and cavalry. As you can probably tell, if you're playing as Parthia and you conquer Athens, you will not have the ability to retrain any of the troops you send to Athens if you did indeed send Parthian, or an army composed of Near Eastern troops in general. And even if you did send some Greek or Hellenic troops, it will take a while before you have the ability to construct the barracks and other infrastructure necessary to retrain them there. This goes for every other faction as well, and you will find that this system really makes it difficult to expand quickly, and you will definitely find yourself overextended unless you take the proper precautions. This recruitment system alone makes the game far more challenging, strategic, and educational. You no longer just take several provinces in a lightning strike blitzkrieg campaign. You have to plan out your campaigns, especially if you're invading a region that has a foreign population and units that you are unfamiliar with. You have to make sure you invade with enough force to hold the region until you can train up local forces to hold the area in the future. In my comparison video, when I talk about the recruitment systems in EB1 versus EB2, I state that I prefer the system in EB2 since it utilizes the recruitment pool system in Medieval 2, which further limits the players and the AI's ability to spam particular units and makes you think even more strategically. Perhaps in that video I sounded a bit too harsh on EB1's system. It still works extremely well, and you still end up with very diverse armies due to the AOR system. In order to respond more quickly to threats across your burgeoning empire, you have to take advantage of local unit types so that you are not overwhelmed. The economy system in EB1 is a bit more straightforward than EB2. Certain buildings, like mines, provide more straightforward and easily understandable bonuses that don't vary too much from province to province. While I like that EB2 has more variation and does include the ability to construct buildings that won't provide a bonus at all really, for example, constructing mines as Rome in EB2 provides you with almost nothing. I mean in Rome. Whereas constructing mines in Sopene will net you around 1000 gold per turn. EB1's system is definitely a bit more straightforward, which some players may appreciate. The character traits in EB1 are also excellent. Just like EB2, you have characters that can be smart, vigorous, charismatic, and these have an effect on their different traits. So for example, a dull character will never really be able to be an effective governor. And every faction has such a wide variety of possible traits. But the best systems are indeed for the Greeks and Romans, who have incredibly detailed and numerous traits that are also based on their professions. EB2's system is a bit more in-depth, but EB1 is no slouch at all. The standout feature of EB1, much like EB2, is in its reforms systems. Most factions have a nice, elaborate reforms system that really make the campaign feel dynamic as you progress. In the Europa Barbarorum 2 review, I went over the reforms for the Koinon Helenon and Hayastan in detail, and I have talked about the Pontic reforms as well in a separate video. The reforms in EB1 are, in general, not as in-depth as those in EB2 for most factions. I would say that the reforms for the Saka, Hayastan, and the Romans are equally as in-depth in EB1 as they are in EB2, but EB1 only has 9 faction reforms. Factions like the Koinon Helenon that have long, elaborate processes in EB2 don't have any reforms in EB1 at all. This is one area where EB2 is definitely a bit stronger and allows for more role-playing and historical progression. This is not to say that the EB1 reforms that are in the game aren't great. The reforms that I just mentioned for the Romans, for Hayastan, the Saka, and the Parthians are excellent. Every reform system included allows for a more historical progression for your faction, and it is truly a joy to see your nomadic Saka kingdom progress to become a settled Indo-Saka empire with powerful Indo-Hellenic infantry to supplement your second-to-none cataphract cavalry. The campaign in EB1 is far more slow-paced than the Blitzkrieg of vanilla Rome. Buildings and units are expensive, and good high-tier buildings take a long time to construct. Mine upgrades cost around 30,000 gold and take 20 turns to build. Noble royal barracks take 15 turns and cost over 10,000 gold to complete. While it all does seem a bit overwhelming at first, it really lends itself well to role-playing, and it also guides you towards expanding and building up your kingdom from the start. You can't just conquer half of Europe in a few dozen turns after a few battles. Building up your small kingdom or tribe here takes time, and it requires a lot of strategic thinking both on the campaign map and on the battlefield. When you expand, you have to think about the economic, cultural, and military implications of taking that new province. Was it historically ever part of your kingdom or cultural zone of influence? Can you recruit or retrain your troops there? Can that province provide you with enough of an economic boost to be worth garrisoning it and building it up? There are so many things to consider that you really don't think about it in the vanilla campaign. It's really phenomenal, and I'd say it is stronger here than in EB2 for one big reason. I find that EB1 is, in general, a tougher game. When a faction is labeled nigh impossible in EB1, it can truly feel that way. EB2 is not easy by any means, but I find the campaign AI to be a bit more forgiving in general. Perhaps this is due to the larger map affecting the AI in some way in EB2. Additionally, since it takes such a long time and since it's expensive to build up high-tier barracks, it is very tough to expand quickly. You have to take a few provinces, but then you not only have to build up your new provinces, you have to also improve the economy and the military-industrial complex of your home provinces in order to better facilitate further expansion and protection of your newly gained provinces. It really gives you the feeling that there are distinct phases in the campaign, with expansion followed by a period of consolidation, and this continues throughout the game. It's my personal favorite Total War campaign of all time, though perhaps that may be my nostalgia talking as well. EB1 has an excellent assortment of factions. Rome Total War includes amalgamations like Gaul, the Germans, and Spain, while Europa Barbarorum avoids that as much as possible and includes specific tribes or kingdoms when possible. The Suebi are the major Germanic faction in the game. The Aedui and the Arverni are the two Gaulish factions. The Cassai are the Britannic tribe replacement. And the Lusitanians are the major Iberian tribe that get a major faction slot here. Every faction is well developed and unique, with a slew of unique and regional units. Additionally, where you decide to expand also determines how your campaign will go, as you will get access to a plethora of unique regional units depending on the provinces you take. Of course, due to Medieval II's higher faction limit, EB2 has a few factions that EB1 does not have, such as the Kingdom of the Cimmerian Bosporus in the Crimea, Nabatea, and the Indian Taxashila faction. Another extremely nice touch is the language mod that they have put in. That is, the units don't speak in stereotypical accented English, but rather in their native language, or at least something close to it. There are language packs for Latin, Greek, Celtic, Parthian, and a few others. Of course, this means that some factions unfortunately use a language pack that isn't 100% appropriate, such as the Sakarauka or Hayastan that use the Parthian language pack. But such things are unavoidable in a mod of this magnitude. This paragraph was of course taken from my EB2 review, since it applies here as well. The original soundtrack of Europa Barbarorum is also classic. There are tracks that take inspiration from ancient compositions and instruments, and it is truly extremely well done. There is the one Vuvuzela sounding Eastern track that I don't think anyone likes, however, but aside from that, it's a classic. The battles in Europa Barbarorum are nice, if a bit slow-paced. Morale is higher in general than in Europa Barbarorum 2, I find, though of course it depends on the types of troops you are fielding and facing. While morale shocks are less common in EB1, I find that melee is less of a slog here. Melees in the street don't take nearly as long as they do in EB2. I enjoy the combat in both mods, but I'd say I prefer the EB1 battles just a tad more due to the feel of the battles in the original Rome Total War engine. There is another thing I have to talk about here. There are several versions of EB out right now, including EB Finale, EB Alexander, and a few other versions in addition to a bunch of smaller patches and mini-mods. For this review, I played EB 1.2. which was the final version released by the initial EB team. EB Finale is currently in development for the Alexander engine, and it has many aspects that look cool, including new siege engine models, unique-looking diplomats for each faction, as well as a ton of new units, but it isn't quite complete yet. Once the final version of that is out, I will take a look at it. In its current form, it's a bit too unstable for me to review. During a whole bunch of testing, using the version 1.2, I only experienced one unrepeatable CTD in EB 1.2, so for the moment this is the version I recommend playing. The link to this version and the finale version are in the description below. In the end, whether you prefer EB1 or EB2 is down to a few factors. Do you prefer Rome Total War or Medieval II's engine overall? Do you mind that EB2's graphical design is a bit more uneven? Do you prefer Rome's population mechanic or Medieval II's recruitment pool system? Do you prefer Rome or Medieval II's battle mechanics? Do you prefer EB2's larger and more detailed map or EB1's better looking, smaller map? Do you prefer EB2's greater devotion to historical accuracy and stricter scripts, or EB1's larger amount of freedom on the campaign map? In the end, I personally can't quite choose which one I like more. I appreciate their differences and similarities, and I really can't say I prefer one of them more than the other. I suppose it depends on which faction I'd like to play. But in any case, they are both incredible mods. Thanks for watching! If you enjoy my coverage of the historical Total War games and their mods, then please leave a like and subscribe for future content. It really helps out the channel. I'll see you in the next one.